You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started. Data protection is a top priority with today's work-from-home workforce. However, current data loss prevention tools inadequately protect data in cloud or SaaS offerings from insider threats. Secure Circle automatically protects data as it leaves SaaS services such as GitHub, AWS, and Salesforce. The protection is transparent to users and works with any application to persistently protect data, even source code. Secure your data with Secure Circle's Zero Trust Data Protection. Begin your 30-day free trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Secure Circle. Welcome to Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp. I'm Paul Asadornian here with Dan DeCloss, the president and CEO of Plextrac. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Yes, nice to have you here and talk about purple teaming, which is always a fun topic. But of course, It means different things to different people, right? And when I talk to my pen tester friends, they talk about how every organization may do it slightly differently. So what is a purple team and what are the most important components, in your opinion, Dan?
Yeah, so I would say, starting with the traditional sense that most, penetration testers have been doing for a long time, is that really technical assessment that is a collaborative assessment where you're sitting down across with the blue team or in a remote environment where you're being able to collaborate with the blue team and say like, hey, we're testing these things. Can you pick it up? Can you identify it? And it's a very valuable and important exercise to have in an organization. And so that's probably the more traditional sense. But as things progress naturally, people will do different things. And so really, if you were to kind of abstract that away from the deep dive technical penetration testing, purple team is really anybody that's coming together from both a red and a blue aspect. So red being anything kind of proactive where you're trying to identify gaps in the security of the policies or controls of the organization. And then having the blue team really be able to collaborate alongside you with like, yeah, we were able to detect that, or okay, we weren't. So we're going to assign this as a ticket to whomever we need to go and resolve that problem.
Yeah, it's interesting, like a regular pen test is more, the way I think of it is like a functional or regression test, kind of like a hands-off QA assessment, right, of your network security posture, right? Like you're just going to hand it over to the red team. They're going to do their thing and create a report. And that's important as, relating it to software, right, is as a functional test or a unit test or QA test, right, where the purple team is more of a collaborative exercise that is really testing processes, procedures, and your defensive techniques, as well as your team, right, and ability to collaborate. Did I capture that kind of?
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I think, in some respects, it's a more in-depth tabletop exercise, right? And we always encourage those as you mature in your security program. And even early on, you can conduct these types of assessments even internally. There's plenty of opportunities and platforms out there to actually collect the tests. And in fact, Plextrac is releasing a runbooks module this month to be able to conduct these exercises internally or, in tandem with your external penetration testing team. But it's really important to be able to do this continuous assessment early on and being able to say, like, here's what we're going to test, maybe take it in small chunks, right, execute it, be able to collaborate back and forth. And also from the blue team's perspective, be able to say like, hey, if this were to happen, what's our escalation procedure? Who do we contact? When do we get PR involved? When do we get legal involved? These are all important questions that you have to train your team and all the stakeholders throughout the communication channel, because it becomes so vital as you do prepare for a potential breach or any kind of incident.
And we run into this when we test our own software, right? Is someone will find a problem, right? Whether it's a security vulnerability or misconfiguration during a purple team, or whether user finds a bug in software, and I do this I'm guilty of this all the time. I'm like, I just want to just dig in and fix it, right? And that's bad for a lot of reasons, right? And I know it's bad and I still do it, but it's bad for a lot of reasons, right? You want to make sure you follow your change control process. You want to make sure you're documenting that this was an actual vulnerability, that here is the fix, and then this is where I'm going to implement the fix, and that gets tracked. And it's wonderful to have a platform like Plextrac to track all of that. And I highly encourage folks go out and get that product specifically for purple teaming, so you can keep track of things, right? Because things may come back around, right? You want to have this tracking mechanism, not have it be in a spreadsheet or email, but have it be in software so you can track that through the life cycle of, when we did this purple team exercise, we identified this thing, we fixed it, we pushed that fix, right? And be able to track that progress, so if it gets backed out or whatever, you can track it, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also be able to identify whether or not that particular finding has been identified in your environment before.
Yep.
And so now you have metrics on, hey, this is how many times it got reported. This is how long it actually took to get fixed. And so now your security director or your CISO or even your board have more metrics and analytics on the trends of, are you making progress? How quickly are things getting resolved? And are you sticking to those procedures? Or where are the gaps that we need to really improve from a procedure perspective to get those trends, like, you know, the mitigation timelines down, so that as things get reported, they get resolved in an efficient manner, but also, you know, don't break, you know, other things in the process.
And now, do you have links or integrations rather with the attack simulation tools as well?
We have an integration with Scythe, so you can upload your Scythe information straight into Plextrac, and those get recorded as activities that you can then go and add evidence to or make comments on, you know, or if they're not a finding, you know, remove them from the report. And then with our runbooks module that's coming out this month, you can have all of that data stored within the actual engagement before the report is created. So what's nice about the runbooks module is that you can execute these activities and these campaigns and start to identify which activities were successful or not. And then you have additional metrics on, you know, here are the things that we're doing well, and here's the things that we actually need to improve. And those are the items that get reported as risks.
And so the runbook, explain what the runbook is, I guess, and how,
Sure.
Is a runbook used by the testers or the blue team, or is it collaboration?
It can be both, right? So the nice thing is that, you know, we get a lot of requests for being able to, you know, execute a methodology for a specific engagement. And even like from a consulting firm or just an internal red team's perspective, you may have like certain execution steps that you want everybody to conduct during the engagement. Like, here's how we're going to test for SQL injection, and did you do these things? Or, you know, here's how we're going to test for privilege escalation, and did you do these things? So that's one use case for the runbooks. But we also are tying them into the Atomic Red Team and MITRE ATT&CK, so that you can conduct simulations based on APTs. So similar to you know, what you would see from other, you know, purple team, you know, diving into MITRE. And what's nice about it is it does have this collaboration component, to where not only can the red team go in and perform these execution steps, and it's all documented, and they can provide the evidence and the timestamps and everything like that, but then the blue team can also see that in tandem and be able to say, like, yeah, we were able to detect this. Here's the you know, the Splunk logs or the IDS logs, you know, or the firewall logs, whatever, and be able to show, like, here's the evidence for us of us actually detecting this. And then you can determine with the red team whether or not that actually needs to be included as a finding in the final report, or just, hey, this activity was executed and unsuccessful.
Now, are the runbooks also like a template, right? So I create a runbook, I associate it with an engagement, and then after the engagement, I'm like, you know, I want to go back and add a couple of things. You go back and update the template and then associate with a new engagement?
Exactly. You can either update the original one, or you can create a new one based off of that one.
Yep.
So like, say you have like this baseline of things you always want to include, but then from here on out, hey, for these types of assessments, we're also going to add XYZ. You know, you can keep that original one and create a new one based off of it.
That's great. It sounds like that's, you know, stuff I used to keep in spreadsheets and documents, right? Right. And now we have it in a centralized repository, which is nice.
Yeah.
And I also love the integration with Scythe, because I love to automate things, right? And people get this kind of warped perception of automation, right? Like, I'm not saying automate everything with an AI bot and we all get to live on an island in Fiji. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if in that purple team exercise, you know, you have a finding and you want to retest always that one, to speak to your continuous assessment, right? I always want to test this XYZ attack path, right? You can customize a module in Scythe, and add it in, and then it gets fed into Plextrac, right? And we can all work off of that same thing because we know things change, right? I push out a fix for something that fixes that particular attack path, but an update breaks that change gets backed out, that spins up a new system and it has that particular flaw, right? There's all these different things that we actually talked about in vulnerability management that we have to manage because things are not static. And that's why I love attack simulation coupled with your tool to have that continuous assessment.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, early on in the cybersecurity days, at least when I got into security, a lot of things were focused on that reactive, continuous monitoring, starting to get to that state of like, how do we detect all of these things, in a continuous fashion? And so as the industry has matured and grown, not only now are we, in this continuous monitoring capability, but now we need to be in this continuous assessment capability. And that's really what we're trying to facilitate across the board. And then, partnering with groups like Scythe to be able to say like, here, you can do this in a continuous fashion. And maybe it's just testing small things to start with, but that's how you grow and show your maturity as you continue to progress. And I think it's really an important aspect for anybody starting a cybersecurity program, or if you're, well along the way and have a mature program, being able to show that we're testing things in a continuous fashion. I think it's important because, being a pen tester, I hated coming back a year later, doing the same exact assessment and basically writing the same report,
right?
And not being able to show that you've made, and even collaborate with the teams on making this progress.
And that's one thing your platform does really well is allow for that collaboration and tracking, right? I love to see long gone the days are pen tester comes in for a week, generates this massive report, hands it off to the team. Maybe they do some stuff, maybe they don't. Then you come back a year later and it's essentially the same thing. That we need to get away from that in a big way. Yeah. And Plextrac really enables that kind of constant assessment and looking at all of your exposures and tracking them. So.
Yeah, and it's important that as organizations grow, they bring this capability in house and utilize the external teams for those those annual assessments or those periodic assessments with the third party eyes. But like you need this capability in house, and we're always going to have a talent shortage for that. So being able to utilize platforms like ourselves, like Plextrac, to be able to help assist in that capability is important. And then utilizing something like Scythe, where you can actually say like, hey, here we may not have a team full of pen testers, but we've got a couple really talented people that know what they're doing and then can utilize these other tools to augment that capability. And then you really show the progress that you're making from a continuous perspective year round. Then augment that with your external penetration tests or your external audits. And now you have a fantastic way to show your data through Plextrac to anybody that's asking for it, whether that's a breach insurance provider, your board, anybody that's, a third-party risk manager, anybody that's kind of asking questions about how frequently do you test your systems? How do you frequently do you test your controls? You have all that information right here within Plextrac.
Yeah, and it's interesting if I was the customer, right, I'd have my pen test team use Plextrac, deliver the reports, and then even cherry pick ones and say, hey, can you either show me how to configure Scythe or customize Scythe to repeat that attack, build it into Plextrac, so we can continually test this one thing, right? And I would pick, some of the top things that came back in my pen test report. I'd engage with my pen test team to say, the external one, right? Like, hey, help me configure this, right? That's providing a lot of value, I think, to the customer.
Yeah, absolutely. The more we talk about automation, and the more you can eliminate the routine exercises, like copying and pasting out of documents. I mean, that wastes a lot of time. Yep. And if you can eliminate that, then you can really focus on getting the real security work done. And that's really where Plextrac thrives.
Absolutely. Fantastic, Dan. Folks can learn more and get a free trial at securityweekly.com/Plextrac. Thanks so much, Dan.
Hey, thanks, Paul. Great to see you.
Stay tuned for more interviews on the Virtual Hacker Summer Camp coming up next. Welcome back to Security Weekly's Virtual Hacker Summer Camp. I am Paul Asadorian, and like many of you, you might have been wondering, well, at least I have, about the intersection of security and privacy operations. If you've wondered about that as well, you tuned into the right segment. Here to help me talk about that is Gabe Gumbs from Spirion. Gabe, welcome.
Welcome to me. Thank you for having me on again, gentlemen. How you guys doing?
I'm doing great. You're looking very tropical.
I mean, I can't be in the desert, so I figured I'd be on an island, right?
Right? I mean, why not? Las Vegas is kind of like an island in the middle of the desert, if you think about it, actually.
It is. It certainly is, yeah.
But we're not there. We're virtual and remote, which is, kind of a shame. I wish we could share drinks, Gabe, and stuff like that.
No.
Commiserate and cause trouble.
I miss our weekly, yeah, if only we're weekly, our yearly summer camps.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll do it virtual like we have been doing for quite some time now. Feels like forever. But you wanted to talk about the intersection of... Now, when you say security and privacy operations, it sounds like there's a privacy operations function. Is that true?
Ooh, so that's a good question. Is there such a function? There is no well-established function at the moment, as we know it, in the security industry. But what there is there's a whole lot of security operations folks, starting kind of from the CISO down, that are being asked to either now manage a bunch of privacy management tools and or fulfill other privacy technology functions, including responding to privacy risk. And some of those are more operationally in terms of so who actually responds to a DSAR? Do we have the data? Well, most of the folks operating that technology are largely in the security domain right now. And so by default of design, a lot of these privacy-related operational duties are falling to them. If you look at the NIST privacy framework, which just intermingles the security framework, it overlays a lot of these functions directly onto the security group. And so, yeah, the conversations that I've been having are curious, right? It's so who actually owns privacy operations, right? And who's actually performing the work? So if there's a privacy incident, which you and I could easily argue, every single breach that we've ever reported on was a privacy violation, right? All of that sensitive data that belonged to you and I that found its way into the world, those before there were privacy regulations were already privacy violations. There was just no established body saying, hey, now you're going to get a slap for that, right? So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's interesting, too, as I think about it, because with privacy, right, I actually come up with 3 scenarios, because I used to work for a university, and that's the weird one. There's privacy of the students at the university, which they're part of the university, but they're also a customer in a sense, right? Then there's the external customers that use my product or my application or my social media network or whatever. And then there are internal employees. And I think those are 3 very different, privacy kind of things. Like when I worked for the university, if there was a celebrity or a famous person's child that was attending the school, we had to do separate stuff. And that, like you said, fell on an IT security sometimes, right? Depending on which configuration we had at the time. But those are 3 different scenarios, Gabe,
They are. Universities are an interesting beast too, because your faculty, you've got university faculty that are, as I understand it, because we've got a number of customers in this domain, they operate under different rules based on their unions as well too, where they've got some very different privacy restrictions around what you can and can't do even with their systems. But if I take it to a more corporate side of the world, you've got customers and you have employees. And then you have employees that live in California versus employees that live in, New York, versus an employee, if you're an international company, that lives somewhere in, maybe Germany or the UK or wherever it is. And so there are different rules even for all of those different individuals, whether they are a customer or employee, and even then where they live. And so when you're protecting that data as, just your run-of-the-mill everyday security operations person or security analyst, a couple of years ago, we didn't really think about how we protected that information differently. Security. And you can't have privacy without security, but you certainly can't have, you can have security without privacy, right? But you can't have privacy without security. So again, if you can't have privacy without security, what is the role of the security operations analyst in this world now? What role do they play in segregating, applying different controls, like sharing controls? Like, how do you make sure that data isn't being shared with the wrong people? Because, sharing controls internally, those are oftentimes functions of IAM technologies and staff. So how does that change now when you have a different requirement around sharing that data with third parties? Because I revoke my consent because now I'm allowed to revoke my consent.
Well,
right?
yeah,
Like,
and
that
those
wasn't a thing
changes
several years ago.
And those changes are very interesting, right? I think, 20 years ago, right, if we're working in IT and we thought about, well, I'm storing people's names, maybe their phone numbers and email addresses. As a security person, you're like, yeah, like I can look at a phone book and get most of that. Like, not a big deal. Fast forward to today. Well, wait, now we have to really protect that data. And how we protect that data, what lengths we go to protect it. And again, it goes back to your, like, where do they live? What is their role in the company? And how do we get educated on this, right? To even know as a security person, like, what's the classification of that data, right? We just used to kind of make it up as we went. It's a lot more formal now.
It's a lot more formal now. Where do you go to get that information is exactly the first step. It's like, all right, so you're telling me that there's already a law in place that mandates I have to perform these activities. So where do I even go to get the information to understand what I have to do? I'll tell you that I haven't had a conversation with CISO in the last 8 months where there wasn't a privacy officer on the line at the same time too. And not because it was some kind of oversight thing. This was more just, them working together because they can't go it alone. The privacy officer can't go it alone any more than the security officer can't go it alone. And the privacy officer doesn't have any staff beyond just kind of, legal representations, et cetera. And it's all of the IT and security staff that maintains the environment where the data is that this is falling to.
Right. Well, and because the regulations change. It was interesting, going back to my university example, right? And I had to look it up because I had a mental block. I couldn't remember. When I got there, I was like, wait, how do we handle student data? Because, like, this is new to me. I hadn't worked for a university before. And they're like, have you heard of FERPA? And I'm like, God bless you. Like, what is FERPA, right? And I'm like, oh, there's a guideline and a standard. I'm like, oh, I can, I can get this, right? But in a lot of those cases, we may not have that formal of a standard, right? That's been around. I mean, FERPA was 1974, according to the internet, right? So we knew that going into it, but now we've got all these GDPR and all these things that are changing. Keeping up with it, I can see a role of privacy operations dealing with the changing laws, dealing with all of the different personas that you have to deal with that live in all of the different locations, right? Someone to keep it all straight and work with the IT and security teams and developers to talk about what lengths we need to go to protect what data.
Yes. And you're right. Some folks have been, I'll use the word lucky, that things like FERPA have existed for that long. And so there were some guidelines that already govern that if you happen to have been working with student data. If you're working with healthcare data, HIPAA's been around since the 90s, so you've had that guidance also. If you're in the retail space or the technology space, there was no such thing.
Right.
Even PCI is not about protecting the privacy of a cardholder.
No.
It's about protecting the security of the cardholder data. It's literally called a cardholder data environment. There was no thought about protecting the privacy of whether or not, what were Paul's buying habits on Amazon anyway? What's all of these? Paul's got some very interesting shopping habits there, right? Like that's more of a privacy concern if you don't want that data accidentally getting out versus a security breach where your credit card may have been taken. I don't know that even in like the news we've heard much about some of the other data that has been taken in those breaches. Like I'm willing to bet if we go back in time, rewind the machine and go back and look at some of that data, when we were all concerned about, oh no, a credit card got out. Oh no, an email address got out, a password got out. Did any of your shopping history also get out? Because no one looked at that and thought, shopping history is, there was nothing security related with that. There's certainly something privacy related there that also made it out. It'd be interesting to take a look back into the Wayback Machine, if you would. Not the Infinite Wayback Machine, but
also, the privacy of that data and the ability to monetize it are two different things, right? Obviously, my healthcare information can be monetized a lot of different ways, right? My shopping history, all right, yes, but how do you, how does an external third party monetize that? Amazon can monetize that, right? But if it's leaked out, how do other people necessarily monetize it, right? And I don't know if that plays into it. I still feel like it's a privacy violation. It should be protected, but there's also kind of what people do with it if it is made public.
I mean, I'm not going to give anyone any ideas, but I'm going to give them ideas. So what if a bit of ransomware hit your machine and it was like, hey, if you don't pay I'm going to let everyone know about all these other things you've been out here buying that might be a little salacious.
Right.
You don't really want me posting that all on your Twitter feed, do you?
Yeah, I don't need people to know I bought a 55-gallon drum of lube or anything like that.
That was last week.
That's right. There's been
You're
one here
aggravating.
in the studio. It's a joke. Anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of things where we think about, and that's one of those things I hear from a lot of folks. There's like, but why do I care about that information? Right up until I make a statement like, well, would you be okay with me just posting it everywhere then?
Right.
Yeah. But you're also right. Monetizing it is a huge deal. And so from a competitive standpoint, getting my hands on shopping history data is a big deal for competitors. And everything from understanding where you source your goods and what price you get them at is a huge competitive advantage to understanding
you're right.
your customers' buying habits. Those are massive. Yeah.
It is very different. Yeah. I can see as we talk, right, the role of privacy operations now being increasingly important, especially in today's landscape.
For sure, and I haven't even begun to touch on all of the intersections that I've been looking at, because there's so many things that we've developed over the years in our security operations that are still so very nascent in the privacy world that I don't think folks have really started understanding what to look at and where to look at. Understanding health and time series data from a network perspective, that's something we've always been looking at. Threat intelligence data, something we've been looking at. But understanding the flow of consent data into our organization, that's not something that we're really putting directly against that same data set right now as well too. So there's a lot to go there still. Yeah,
I think there's a lot that can be, misunderstood or taken for granted, especially even with things like your phone number. Like if you bought a car and registered a car, and this happens in different ways, right? Like all of a sudden you're getting calls about your warranty. You're like, wait a minute, was there a consent form somewhere in all that paperwork that I filled out? And you become more conscious of it, but it's too late, right? Like essentially like you got to change your phone number, right? Once that stuff is out. So how do we, help the consumers get ahead of it by establishing the privacy practices within our organization and doing that as early on as we can? Because once the cat's out of the bag, it's out of the bag, right?
And there's no putting it back in. This may be the one time where you hear me say, I think the consumer side of this is ahead of the technology and the security side, which is kind of rare, right? Which is a byproduct of things like GDPR, CCPA. It's given the consumer that power to own their own data. So let me kind of break it down a little bit more discreetly, if you would. On the security side of operations, you've traditionally had things, again, like your monitoring, your analysis, your orchestration, automation. And your monitoring side of things, you're monitoring access, you're doing, threat detection, patch management. The analysis side, you're looking at user entity behavior alerts. You're looking at, in case of compromise, you prioritize those alerts. You're orchestrating and automating your incident containment, your system isolations, your remediations, all of that good stuff. On the privacy side of that, you've got kind of three general areas there, right? You've got your data collection intelligence, right? So you use a consent and preference data. Those are capabilities that we've already established in our implementing technologies to give the consumer access to. The flow of data throughout our environment, right? So again, collecting data intelligence around that. Data behavior activity, we have a lot of that. I think we're just not looking at it from a privacy perspective yet. Then you've got all the data processing enforcement. How do you enforce all those things from operationally? Right? So how do you enforce that data in use and making sure you do things like anonymize that data? When I say you can no longer use it, you can't share that with a third party to learn more about my buying behaviors, et cetera. But you still need to process that data, so you may need to anonymize it. On the data security governance side of things, then you've got all of your privacy impact analysis stuff and all of your access governance controls, which again already bleed into your security world. So these things are all overlapping each other. And I can go on and on and on and on and on, but ultimately the trends I'm seeing is a lot more of privacy making its way into security operations. And I've been joking, we're going to need to evolve from just security operations centers to security and privacy operations centers. So you're going to have to go from a SOC to a SPOC. You can go ahead and rim shot me whenever you want there. Where's Johnny with the rim shot? But that's a natural progression in the world we're in right now.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when we think about all this data and we come to the conclusion that we don't want to store as much of it as we thought we wanted to because of these regulations. I think that's a big positive in my mind, right? Because it's eliminating the risk on both sides of the equation. I also think you mentioned PCI. I think it's one of the things that really helped disrupt the Carter's markets of the world is basically people go, oh, I don't need to store every credit card transaction that I've done in the past 10 years. Oh, and PCI is making me do this. And that made it a little harder for the Carters to do their evil bidding, right? And I think with privacy, it's the same thing. I think it's going to be harder for corporations to justify storing that data and maybe abusing it or have a third-party actor break in and then steal the data and abuse it, right? If they're going, yeah, you know what? It's not even worth storing it anymore. I think that's one of the positive things of regulation, and I think something privacy operations needs to advocate for is storing less.
You're not wrong. I think your bigger business challenges, organizations do not exist for the purpose of processing that data. They process that data to exist. And so they're going to want to process it, right? If the way you find new customers is by understanding the buying habits of existing and old customers, you'd need that data. If I tell you to get rid of that data because you didn't originally collect it for that purpose, well, then how do you find new customers? That's just one very minor example. There's some legitimate answers in there again, right? Like you can apply differential privacy controls to it, et cetera. Yeah,
because you can anonymize it, right? I mean, because you take out the PII from it, right? You decouple it from the person. Like you could even store like where they lived and what their buying habits were and all that stuff. But now it's just disassociated from that person.
Easier said than done.
I was going to say that. I make that sound really easy, right? It's really not.
And enter now new types of attacks. Enter now re-identification attacks. They're not new. I mean, re-identification attacks are easily, I want to say the first academic research on it probably goes back 20 years. But in practice, it really mostly affected healthcare data because there was a lot of publicly available healthcare research data, right? And even that information, you have to be careful. If I de-anonymize that data, and the only thing left is in this zip code, there are 2 men that have this medical issue, and they're between this age range, that might be enough to de-anonymize it, unless there's only 10 men in that zip code. Right? I'm oversimplifying, but then it starts getting really easy for me to start whittling down and re-identifying that person. Or I start collecting multiple data sets where I can take one data set of de-identified information and another and start correlating back to each other to start re-identifying individuals. So, you will start seeing these types of privacy attacks where a bad actor doesn't necessarily break into your data stores any longer just for the credit card information. But what I'm looking for now is enough information to help me re-identify individuals from a much juicier pile of data that I got, so I can go back to all of the other nefarious activities I did, whether that's carding or phishing or whatever else it is.
Yeah, because I can see taking social media data and overlaying it with those various sources, and then it's basically game over because no one shares their personal details on social media, right?
Oh, no one. Where they live, what high school they went to, all of that. Absolutely no one.
Right. Yeah, and there's no ways to get that data, of course.
There's no APIs for that stuff. Right? No checks you can write just to one company that will.
Or that too. Yeah, I mean, if you're willing to pay for it, you can get there quicker.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
So now you've made me truly paranoid that I don't want any of my data anywhere. It's basically what it comes down to, Gabe. And rightfully so. That's really how we should present this topic, right?
My work here is done.
But having said that, it's really hard to get your data removed from all of these sources. Yeah,
it's like a pool, right? Once things get in, it's hard to get it out. There are mechanisms, if you would. That is to say, there are combinations of both techniques and technologies.
Yeah.
Because neither one of those things by themselves will do it. That can help you achieve an increased state of data privacy while maintaining the levels of data security that we have today. And even in some cases, increasing the levels of data security we have while increasing data privacy. And what some of that starts with just eliminating some of our old bad practices, like, just encrypting everything. Like, encrypting things is a security solution. It is not a privacy solution. It has done nothing for the privacy of the information within.
Because at some point, someone's got to decrypt that data, or some machine or application has to decrypt it, right? And it's basically what it boils down to.
Usually what happens. It ends up having to be shared or something along those lines. All of those are real world scenarios.
Talk about what's happening at Spirion to close us out. Give us an update.
Wow. Man, it's been busy. It's been real busy. So let's see. So we've launched a couple of new products. So that happened. We launched a new SaaS product service. So folks should go check that out. Data Privacy Manager. Don't tell everyone. In fact, we've got a couple more products launching later this year as well. So we've been very busy. We've been working with a lot of technology partners to help kind of bolster the overall ecosystem of our customers and their and all of these new challenges that they have around data security and data privacy. So we've got some research that we're going to drop later this year on this topic as well too. So we've been really digging into the data and trying to understand what's out there and what's being exposed. So you folks should certainly sign up for the newsletters and keep an eye on that. We launched the podcast. That happened also. Privacy Please. So folks should certainly check that out. What else is going on? Man, there's just so much going on. Yeah. Drop by Spirion.com, drop by @Spirion on Twitter. We've got a virtual booth up at Black Hat this week as well too. So we're out there taking questions and then doing some demonstrations of the new technologies that we've got. And again, sign up for the newsletter. Keep an eye on us. We've got a lot of exciting things still to come this year.
Outstanding. Gabe, thank you so much for appearing on Security Weekly.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Folks who want to learn more can go to securityweekly.com/Spirion. That will conclude, I think, Spirion BH. I knew that. securityweekly.com/Spirion BH. Look, there it is right on the screen in front of me. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll be back tomorrow. Stay tuned.